Hi, everyone. Welcome to Soul Creativity for 2022. This is our first show of the year, and I'm so excited that my first guest for 2022, kicking off the year, is Nicole Rogers. Nicole was actually one of the fire bringers in my documentary, She Brings the Fire. So if you haven't seen that and listen to Nicole's story from that first spark to the fire to creating from fire, you're going to want to go back and listen to that. It's on the YouTube channel, so make sure you catch it. Nicole is an empowerment transformation coach, which are very important um, things that I'm interested in too. So, Nicole, I'm really looking forward to talking to you tonight. It's evening here in the East Coast. Um, and also, I am very interested in, exploring what you talked about a little bit in the documentary as well. And so, thank you for being here and welcome to 2022.
Thank you, Naveen. It is such an honor and a joy to be here with you. I have known you for several years, beginning with us working together, and I have just watched you blossom and bloom and create this beautiful platform and really bring your message to the world. So it's like such a joy to see all of this manifest, from the very first seedling of when I first met you. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for saying that, Nicole. And that makes an opening for me to just tell everyone, what an honor it was and how great it was for me, to be one of your clients back when I was starting with all these ideas. And really, there was just such a shift occurring in the way things were happening and to how people were going to be communicating and interacting and collaborating. And so, that was a good basis. And we had such a good group at the time and so much fun. So I could really recommend you as a coach to anyone who is looking for help. And later, before we end, you can let people know how to get in touch with you. But under the video, there is contact information for both myself and Nicole. So let's get started, Nicole. I wanted to ask you first because you talked about this in the documentary and you really mentioned it as a starting point for how you wanted to start your business, what caught your attention and motivated you, and its powerful presence. And so I was wondering if you could explain to us a little bit about what that is, why it would be important to us, and would you call that a practice? And if so, how would we begin to practice?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. So powerful presence at its most basic is you being okay with who you are. Now, that's a lot easier said than done, right? we've got an inner critic, we've got conditioning, we've got ancestry, we've got all sorts of things. We have our environment and lots of factors that come in and can feel like they're really getting in the way of us just being in a place of acceptance of ourselves, really. And especially for your community, really being an acceptance for your creativity, really being an acceptance for whatever that message is that you are putting out through words or art or dance or speaking or whatever it is. And so, my experience that I had shared in the documentary was that as my first career was as a performer, and I really went by on this feeling that if I showed who I really was, I'd be rejected. And that was not just like on stage, that was also in my life. And so I went through this massive life change with losing everything and had this very transformative experience actually in a healing support group where I just decided to be completely vulnerable for the first time. They're passing the mic around. Who are you? Why are you here? And I'm like, oh God. And I just found that the opposite was true, that if I could just speak my truth and speak from vulnerability and my heart, that actually I found people came closer. And so, as I shared in your documentary, that moment was really like the seed for powerful presence, and then became the beginning for all the work that I've done with all of my clients. And so, it's really powerful presence is you knowing that you have everything you need within you to create the life that you want. Now, that's a pretty big thing to say, right? Because so much of the messaging is that, no, you're broken. No, you don't have it. I've got it, and you've got to get it from me. If you buy this thing, then you'll get it. It turns into this endless loop. But in my experience and what transformed my life and what I've seen transform the life of my clients is that when you come into a place of ownership and recognizing that your power is something that's within, not outside, right? You're not looking for the approval. You're not looking for the permission. You're not running in circles around what, the latest thing is that you should be doing, that it becomes much more about a grounded center. Now, why this is important specifically for creatives is because you have an audience, right? And so this is always a big pain point. It's like, first we have to come to a place of feeling like, okay, I'm okay with who I am, and I want to put my work out. But then it's like, you have to have a relationship with your audience. And that can be really, really scary. And so powerful presence, when you are in a place of I'm okay as I am, then it allows you to expand your audience and attract in the right people, because you're not looking to them for approval, right? They're not that outside source of your power, but they're instead something that you are in co-creation and collaboration with. And so it's very different, right, than a lot of what has been, I think, passed down to creatives in kind of tipping the scales and feeling like we're in these sort of dysfunctional relationships where we've put our audience up on a pedestal. And we're down here just going, is this okay? Is this enough? And so powerful presence is helping you, because you are okay with who you are. You can then be meeting your audience eye to eye. And instead really hearing, like, what is it you need? Like, what is it that lights you up? And being able to share that together. So, it's really, you're lighting up the room because you're okay, as opposed to looking for someone to say you're okay. You are.
That's so true. And that is something I think that we all work on at some point, especially as artists, creatives, and getting our work out there, is that being okay with yourself, especially, when in creativity is such an internal thing. And you have to be really brave a lot of times to put it out there. It's one thing, if you're dancing at home or you're writing or you're drawing, but if you start to put it out there, we're so used to competition and judgment that, it's easy to fall into that. And so as you were talking, I'm thinking about, because you're saying it comes from within. Once we accept ourselves, we're not looking for that from outside of ourselves. So I'm thinking of that as internal resources instead of external. And, ultimately we use both, but this internal resource really interests me because I think that's where a lot of us, have some difficulty. And so I'm wondering, in relation to powerful presence, and I know in the documentary you talked about, having some practices where you really get in touch with your body, which guides you, to that internal resource. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that a little bit and how important that is to that acceptance and process.
Yes, I love that. I think back to my education. to become a professional performer, which was a fantastic education. I moved to New York and I worked. I actually turned down work. So you would think, oh, it's working. Except it wasn't, because I wasn't given any tools around my mind. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't given any tools around what you're talking about, which is actually embodiment. How can I be in my body when something is important, when I'm nervous, when I'm scared, when I'm maybe putting out my, debut novel or my first big concert or something like that. And so that was all just kind of brushed over. And so this sort of like inability to be in my body in the moments that matter most just created such a block, because then it was like I was using all these other tools, which I thought were working, like drowning it out with loud music or other things like that just not so good for me. And just finding myself going, and the critic getting louder and louder and louder. Mm-hmm. So that to say, when we're talking about embodiment, I think it's so important for anyone to know who's watching this, that what works for you is unique. Mm-hmm. And this is so important. When I first start working with a client, we go through my Zen Red method, which has these 4 pillars: inner world, outer world, relationship training, and performance technique. It's very easy to start with outer world, right? It can feel a little safer. Like, how's my environment? How's my organization? Like, do I need to clean things up? But then we get into the nitty gritty, the inner world, which is what we're talking about. And so I start to ask these questions of what allows you to be in your body, right? What allows you to ground? And it's different for everybody. I have some clients that prayer really works. I have some clients that exercise is like, they literally can't sit down to do their creative task unless they have gone to the gym first, right? Because they wake up with an excess of energy. So they need to work it out. And then they're like, okay, now I can sit down and do my writing practice. It might be meditation. It could be yoga. But there is this beautiful discovery around what that is for each person. And it helps take the creative out of this sort of like one size fits all, or I have to be like somebody else, like all of this toxic messaging that it's so damaging to creatives, right? Because we're just trying to put our work out there and do our best, but we've probably been trying to do it like somebody else. Mm-hmm. So it can be a real relief to kind of stop and go, wait a minute. When I do something as simple as like the 3 breaths, which is like what I teach to all of my clients. I do in a lot of my workshops. And if my client goes, wow, I feel a difference, that's biofeedback. That's your body saying this is helpful. I might go through the 3 breaths and the client or the person that's there doing it is like, I don't know, Nicole. Okay, let's try something else. So it then becomes about this discovery about what becomes your practice when you talk about practice, but that is different for everybody. Mm-hmm. So that step is really tuning into the biofeedback. And I like to say of it, it's that like your body has a yes. Mm-hmm. And it's the yes is coming from how you feel after. Because during it might be a little freaky. It might be scary to be connecting with your breath. It might to stretch may not feel good, but how do you feel after? If you feel a calming, if you feel a settling, if you're more aware of your feet, if you're more aware of your seat and your spine, you've settled, you've relaxed, and that is a really good point for you to then make that a part of your daily practice and set you up specifically before you're going to be doing your creative tasks.
That's very good and a very important point. I really like, kind of keeping track of the inner resources that we have, because I know for myself, I find it easy to fall into, you start looking outside because we have so much coming at us all the time. But as you were talking, I was thinking about two additional things that kind of go into that I want to talk about. But the first one is storytelling, which, as you know, I know you love that, and I love that in all its forms. And um, I was, as a fiction writer, as I write with fiction, I realize composing a story and tweaking it, editing it, tweaking it, that's the same kind of process as we go through in, a transformation process. We're listening to our dialogue, we're looking at our location, we're looking at the archetypal situations and characters in our life and how one little element changes everything. So I think storytelling is so powerful. And so there's that outside storytelling, things that are coming at us all the time. You know, we might be labeled, or we're always put in categories, and so there's all that outside, it could be marketing, it could be from a job, in a family that comes at us. But then there's that internal that's running all the time too. And so both of those things can serve to disempower, or if we can transform them or work with them, empower. And I'm wondering, what you think about that and how you use it, and how important you think that is to maybe creatives in general, or someone who wants to transform.
Yeah. So when there's an internal story that feels disempowering, that feels like it's more critical or judgmental, then my first question is it true? But what I mean by that is that these things can kind of run like a loop in our head, and they can get really loud, right? And we can just feel like, oh, I don't want this, right? It's kind of like a disowning in the moment. But what if we turned towards it? What if we turned towards the story, really the voice, right? It's the part of our psyche. What if we turned towards that and just said, hey, I hear you. What is it that you're here to tell me? What is it that you need? Because usually this part is coming up really loud because it feels like that's its function. It feels like that's the only way. But in order to be able to transform the story, right, especially if it's something that feels, like you said, disempowering, the answer is always through. The answer is always curiosity, to understand what's underneath it, because there's been so much toxic messaging around, like, you get rid of your thoughts, or you like kick this to the curb. And it's like, yeah, but there's probably great wisdom there for you. And if you can ground first, right, with whatever that embodiment practice is for yourself, and in a safe space, perhaps with a mentor, with a teacher, a therapist, a coach, have that space to be able to turn towards and ask the question, what's going on? You're probably going to get a very different answer. And you might find that that part of you that's telling the story is just doing it because they think that's the only way they can stay alive. When really what they want to do is contribute. They want to contribute and be there, but they've set up this sort of like protective thing that's become dysfunctional. So my invitation always with these stories is to kind of turn towards them with some discernment. And discernment is only going to come again through you having some kind of embodiment, some kind of practice that allows you to be quiet in your body instead of believing every single thought that comes into your head is real. It's not. Your brain's just doing what your brain does. It produces thoughts. That's your brain working. That's the function of the brain. Congratulations, you're alive. But the thoughts are, it's like they use the analogy of clouds. They're clouds passing. So when you can create that sort of grounding to recognize this is passing, it rises and it falls, it rises and it falls, it allows a little bit of space, which then allows you to approach with curiosity to understand what is a deeper meaning there. So with these kind of things, the inner story, I just always love to ask the question, What are you here to help me with? And what do you need?
I like that because it's a much kinder and gentler way than fighting it. Like you said, like if you're told kick it to the curb or something, then that's like this fight because really, you're trying that, and the next minute you realize that thought's back. And so, it really sounds like a tug of war almost. Whereas if you can approach it at, a kinder level and in a softer way, it sounds like, you can make more progress then, and it's not so difficult. Um, and it's easier to approach it that way rather than it be the enemy.
Absolutely.
I want to mention to our listeners, Nicole, that the live chat is up. So if anybody has a comment or question, please feel free to go ahead and put it in the comment box, and I will keep an eye out for it. Along with storytelling and what we were talking about before, internal resources, having an embodiment practice, something I think is important for creatives, and I know it is for me and a lot of my friends who, you know, um, would label them, so everyone's creative, but maybe they're writers or performers or artists, is that we tend to be interested in a lot of creative things. Just like I like to write, I like to make film. I'm really interested in conscious media and entertainment. It's kind of vast. Maybe it all has the same root, but we were kind of always taught you have to focus on one thing, and focus is important, but what do we do with all these little strands of ourselves that are floating around us? And what should we do with that? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I feel like you could probably answer this question for me, Naveen, based on the work that we did together. But I have this amazing tool called Dreamstorming that was actually taught to me by my coach mentor, Ferocia Knight. And it's so fabulous. Talk about a kind way to bring yourself into integration, right? Because creatives, like, we have many avenues, and we're not going to compartmentalize. And the whole reason that we became artists and creatives was because we didn't want to, punch a clock and go to the bank and do one thing for the rest of our lives. Like, we heard the call young, and we decided to, feed and nourish that. So within Dreamstorming, basically what happens is you have like these 5 parts of yourself. You have the actioneer, you've got the visionary, you've got the skeptic, you have the engineer, and who am I forgetting? I'm forgetting one of them. What?
You did the visionary, the dreamer.
That's the visionary.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. My brain. But what happens is that each one of these parts has like a way they can contribute to whatever you're feeling stuck around. Mm-hmm. So it's like you kind of like the way that I was taught to teach it is it's kind of like a 5-pointed star. And so in the middle, it's like you literally will like put like these 5 parts on a piece of paper. I remember I had you guys like literally stepping into it. But in the middle, you kind of put this question that you have. And it's basically like, how can I bring all 5 parts to this challenge that I'm having? Like, how do I create my website and show all of who I am? How do I have a social media platform that really, pays tribute to all of these things that I offer to my audience? These are the kind of the questions that come up with multi-talented creatives. And so it's a really beautiful way to bring all of these aspects of you, these more like linear parts, these more, it's kind of like you're bringing the yin and the yang together, the masculine and feminine together, to be able to find what that common thread is. And so what I love to do with my clients is say, okay, what is it that is so important for you to say, to share, or to teach with your audience? Because it depends, depending on the creative, there might be a teaching side to it. There may not. It might be just a straight up, here's my expression and here's the site, and please buy many of it, you know, but that regardless, there is a theme that runs through everything you do. And so that is something that I really help my clients with, because you can get caught up in going, oh, but I like to do music and I like to write, and feeling like, but I have all these different expressions, but you have all these expressions of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's trusting that and using these different parts of you to recognize what that is. So, for myself, it was when I first did dreamstorming, when I was going through my coaching training, it was such an aha moment, because I realized that when I was performing, there was a part of me that wanted to be choreographing.
Mm-hmm.
When I was choreographing, there was a part of me that wanted to be performing. When I was teaching, there was a part that wanted to be choreographing. When I was organizing people's offices, there was a part that wanted to be performing, and vice versa. And so there were all these parts. And what was amazing in creating my own platform, which for me was going to be a coach, that's just how it manifested. But for the first time, I had my own platform, right? I wasn't dealing with the gatekeepers and all of that stuff that had been so frustrating. It was now going to be my platform. It was like, oh, no matter what it is that I'm doing, what is it I want to say? So then it could come out through writing, it could come out through coaching, it could come out through speaking, it could come out through dance, it could come out through poetry, but the theme was the same.
That's taking us back to storytelling with the theme. So you can write all these different stories from that one theme.
Yes.
To keep yourself grounded in what your message is and what's important to you, what you value. And talking about having all these different threads to our story and to ourselves, and wanting to express them all, it's making me think of something else that's important, that may sound like the opposite, like it's telling you not to do that, but in reality it's something a little bit different. And it's the old story of, you have to multitask, you have to produce, you have to always be on. If you're relaxing too much, that's not a good thing. So there's a difference between multitasking and being interested in pursuing different creative outlets. And I'm wondering if you could talk about that, because, I think multitasking isn't necessarily a very good thing for us to be doing all the time.
Well, I literally just wrote about this on my blog. It's actually a fallacy. So multitasking is something that is really created by the patriarchy, to keep us in this very toxic mode that literally damages our brain. It literally damages and changes our brain. So it's like, wait a minute, so it really is coming back to this sort of messaging around produce, succeed,
Mm-hmm.
which is just death to the creative, because the creative process has its own time, especially if you're working with the muse. Like, it's nothing for you to control, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so much more a process of surrender. And so coming back to powerful presence, if you can be in your body and be quiet, then you can just work on your script. You can just work on your canvas. You can just work on creating your team. You can just work on your concert tour and nothing else. And so that is vitally important, because you're bringing all of you to that task, right? You're not parceling yourself off, which is what multitasking does. But it really is just the ability to focus on one thing and the thing that is important in that moment. So like, I think about, I spent last year writing my first book. So exciting. And this book has been in me for years. But I knew I really needed to safeguard the actual writing time. And so that meant turning off my email, putting my phone on silent. And I literally went into my phone and I calendared out 3 days a week in the morning. And I didn't schedule anything else in that time. No clients, nothing. So that when I would come into my office to write, I was just writing. And so there was just this like open space that when I would get in front of the computer, I could just be with the story. I could just be with what was alive in me, you know, and it was a very loving experience. I didn't feel pressure. You know, honestly, what I said to myself last year was I was going to start. I didn't even want to say when I was going to finish, and it ended up coming out in 5 months, which was a complete surprise to me. But it was because when I was writing, I was only writing. So it's like, you know, whatever that creative process is, it requires such care. So if you can bring your presence to it, your focus to it, then you're going to be so much more open to whatever the inspiration is, whatever that next thing you want to do with the character is, right? Because you're not checking your email. You don't have notifications going off. And I know this can be challenging depending on where it is that you do your work. Right. So it is, you know, with the best effort you can to create as much space and quiet as possible so that it is all just flowing through you naturally, and that you are there not making a to-do list or thinking about the groceries or something else.
Yeah. And as you're talking about that too, and we were talking about the body guiding us, it made me think that when you're in that place of creating from, you know, the quiet, you're not multitasking or thinking about, you know, all those other things. I think that actually reduces the stress level in the body. So, you know, I notice when I can do something like that, when I'm completely focused on writing or some creative thing, and I'm not saying the writing's like easy, but I'm in that zone, you know, I feel like my body, when I'm done, I notice that my body feels more relaxed and calm, as opposed to if I was sitting there trying to work, like thinking I have to do this next, I have to do that, then you can feel like your stress level going up. So there's that other physical benefit to it.
Yeah, and that's so important, because it is. You feel that it's the anxiety. And when the anxiety raises, it's like everything's getting caught here. And then it's, you know, the ideas aren't coming. You're doubting yourself. Oh God, what did I just write in that last sentence? You know, like, this is, you know, and then in comes the critic, you know, you can't write that. Who do you think you are? Like all this stuff, probably because the critic is going, would you just relax? Oh my God, we just need, turn off your phone, please turn off your phone. You know, I think of, this is a little bit different, but it just makes me think of like Elizabeth Gilbert in Big Magic. And she talks about like receiving the muse. Well, if you're not open and relaxed and quiet, how's that going to happen? Yeah. You know, so it's just, I think we do we're so hard on ourselves that how wonderful is it if you can create a creative practice that is actually life affirming, that is actually healthy, that is actually allowing your body to relax, because then you've got that biofeedback. I mean, for me now, writing is kind of like when I bird watch. If people are watching for the first time and they're meeting me, I love bird watching. I love it. And I feel relaxed. I feel in my body. And because there has been this practice around my writing, it's the same thing. And I just find myself just go like this.
A very different way to approach it than, you know, a lot of what we were told and the way we were taught to do things. So that's such an important conversation, Nicole. Everything that we talked about, from powerful presence to creating, and whether someone's creating in a way like painting or writing, it doesn't matter. If you're creating just to get, you create every day, you're creating your life. So all those things apply to whatever you're doing. So it's really good advice. We are a little past what we were going to go, which is fine, but we should wrap it. And I'm so happy that you were the first guest and that we had such a great conversation. Anyone can leave comments after the fact as well. And I want to mention, before I ask you to let people know how they can reach you, that on next week's show, I have a young singer, songwriter. She's just amazing. And she's been singing since she was 8 years old. And she's now a freshman in college. So she has beautiful voice and beautiful talent. So I'm really excited. She'll be on next Thursday, and the time will be a little bit different at 7 p.m. So I just want to let everyone know that. And Nicole, how can people reach you if they want to find out more about your coaching and your powerful presence?
Thank you. Yeah. So your listeners can head over to my website, NicoleRogers.com. And yes, my name is spelled super strange. NicoleRogers.com, NicoleRogers.com. And please come over to Instagram. I'm there, Nicole_Rogers. There is another Nicole Rogers. It's very exciting. I'd love to meet her. So please come over to Instagram. Shoot me up in the DMs. Let me know, what you thought of this and any questions that are there. And I would love to hear from your listeners for what was helpful. So thank you so much. And oh my gosh, your guest next week sounds amazing. I can't wait to hear her.
Yeah, she's really sweet, and hopefully you'll be able to come back, and because there's so many more things we can still talk about, Nicole. We did have one comment from Valerie. Of course, I can't read her. Valerie, and it says evening, both of you. So I think she was just signing off. So that was really nice. And again, everyone, feel free to leave comments after the fact and reach out to Nicole if you want to find more. And otherwise, I will see you next week. And welcome to 2022. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye, everyone.